meet my bride. Let's go for a ride in my newfangled automobile. Just where we will go, nobody knows, but it's sure a great way to feel. Behind the wheel of the Speed Meter Steel, it's my newfangled automobile.
Hello and welcome to Vintage Car History. I'm Wild Bill. It's a very common thing in business for people or companies to purchase other companies. The usual practice is to buy a company that is in decline or even receivership and then either reorganize and revitalize it or perhaps absorb the company's remaining assets into an existing corporate structure. This is the most economical way to go about it, as owners of companies that are going under are more likely to accept a bargain basement offer. Buying a successful, profitable, and debt-free company is much more expensive, especially if the owners are not interested in selling. But that is exactly what happened when some investors purchased the Stanley Motor Carriage Company and created Locomobile. And how it all played down is quite a crazy tale. We'll start with the chief instigator of this transaction, John Brisbane Walker. John Walker, born near Pittsburgh in 1847, was a guy with untamed ambitions. Went to 3 different colleges, including West Point, served as an advisor to the Chinese Imperial Army, and even as a general, found a trophy wife with Emily Strother, all before the age of 26. In 1873, he got involved in publishing and editing, running as a managing editor of both the Washington, D.C. Chronicle and the Cincinnati Commercial Gazette. He was even coaxed by the U.S. government in 1879 to investigate agricultural opportunities in the rather sparse and arid regions of eastern Colorado. Well, he got some 1,600 acres of land and figured out how to grow alfalfa as a cash crop not too far from Denver. Growing marijuana would come a century later, but he used the money to make even more crazy stuff, like a full-fledged amusement park, complete with a horse track, museums, kiddie rides, fireworks. Yeah, a mini Disneyland could be found near Denver, Colorado in 1880 because of this guy. But he did have a love for publishing, and he left Denver in 1893 to go back to New York, specifically to purchase and reorganize a publication that still exists because of his genius, Cosmopolitan magazine. Now, John wanted to expand his empire further, and it would seem that 2 crazy twin brothers, the Stanley brothers, were getting their exploits across New England published in his newspapers. Walker was no engineer, but he saw just how well newfangled automobiles sold papers. And also, due to some very upper-crust clientele that the Stanleys acquired, people would buy the cars themselves. He wanted a piece of the automotive action, and so put a plan into motion. To be honest, it wasn't a particularly brilliant plan. Camp out at the front door to the Stanley's company, wait for them to walk by, and then offer to buy half of their company. I mean, think about it from the Stanley's perspective. You own a very successful and profitable company, you're heading into the office, and some random guy bum rushes you asking to buy half of your company, meaning he would have the majority since current ownership is between Free and Frank. Their initial response was reasonable. Go away before I call the police. But John Walker was persistent. He kept showing up at their door day after day, wearing them down like the widow seeking justice before the unjust judge. Finally, Walker blurted out to them, "Let me just buy the company outright." The Stanleys just shook their heads and replied, "You want it that bad? If you're really that out of your mind, give us $250,000 and you can have it." And Walker shook their hands. But he didn't have $250,000 on his person, so they agreed that he would give them $10,000 immediately and have 2 weeks to come back with the rest. $10,000 was no problem, but the rest was. John didn't have the money. He called all of his friends, associates, and even a few enemies, trying desperately to raise that much cash in time, but to no avail. But at just about the last minute, he remembered that he had a neighbor that he knew casually, but might be able to front the money, if he could convince him. That neighbor was Lorenzo Barber. Lorenzo was a real estate investor that got into the asphalt paving business late in the 1870s. By the 1890s, Barber was responsible for almost half of all the paved roads in the United States of America, and many in England as well. So John Walker pitched this guy that getting into cars would make his roads even more important, and that for a mere 250 grand, he could own half of a major car manufacturer, at the time one of the largest in America. Lorenzo Barber took the bait, gave him the money, and so the Stanley brothers sold their company. So here was the agreement. Walker and Barber owned 50% each in the company. The Stanleys would stay aboard for 1 year as advisors to help with the transition, and then they could go off and start a new Stanley company, which they did. Thus, the company under the new ownership would need a new name. John and Lorenzo chose the name Locomobile, since the steam buggy that the Stanleys designed and they were now building had no transmission, but rather the piston rods were direct drive to the axle and looked much like what could be seen on contemporary locomotives of the time. Locomotive, Locomobile, okay, it's a bit of a stretch, but hey, that's what they did. Thus, in 1899, the Locomobile Company of America was founded in Watertown, Massachusetts, assuming the assets of the Stanley Motor Carriage Company. With the Stanley brothers still helping out for the first year, the company continued to build their design, just with a new logo. They also made a few improvements to the car in that year, and sales were strong. However, the relationship between Walker and Barber became rather strained in short order. Lorenzo wasn't happy when he discovered that he paid the full price for the company yet only had half ownership. Arguments between them erupted over this issue, as well as who to hire to keep things going once the Stanleys are gone. Both men wanted their own family members to be given these positions, and crossfire nepotism isn't typically healthy within a corporate structure. Within a few months, their differences became irreconcilable and the partnership was dissolved. John Walker, no relation to Johnny Walker, but likely did hit the bottle a bit during this time, took half of the company assets and moved to Tarrytown, New York, to be closer to his publishing business. He started a new factory there, building the same steam car design, just under a new name, Mobile. Things had gotten pretty crazy at Locomobile, so he just dropped the Loco. Unfortunately, Walker's company was not successful and was defunct by 1903. Lorenzo Barber, having won the battle for the Locomobile name and without Walker as a thorn in his side, began to bring in his family with wild abandon. First was Samuel Davis, his son-in-law, installed as the company treasurer and chief financial officer. Thankfully for Lorenzo, his family married well, and the various in-laws were actually good at what they did. Davis guided the company well, and by 1902, Locomobile was the largest manufacturer in the USA with over 5,000 cars produced. In the same year, they relocated to larger facilities in Bridgeport, Connecticut to keep up with the demand. Unfortunately, 1902 also saw a downturn in prosperity. Gas-powered cars were gaining momentum, while steam cars were beginning to decline in the marketplace. Also, Lorenzo was having troubles in his other businesses and was close to bankrupt. He wanted to bow out of Locomobile to focus on other issues, and so tapped the shoulder of his brother-in-law, J.J. Albright, who in turn bought out Lorenzo's interest and took his place on the board of directors. At the same time, Sam Davis moved up in the chain to become president of the company. Now, both Sam and JJ were all over the idea of making internal combustion cars, but the skills to do so were not in-house. The factory was capable of doing either one, but someone would need to design them, and steam cars versus gas cars are very different disciplines. Sam and JJ were both good at running a company. They just needed the right engineer to be the brains behind the product. Fortunately, JJ had a close friend with such skills, an engineer with experience in car manufacture that was looking to make a move. Enter Andrew Riker. Oops, sorry, Andrew Frakes. Okay, start over. Andrew Riker was a self-taught engineer and a classic self-made man. He, like many other automotive engineers of his time, got his start in electrical engineering, designing and building motors, transformers, and the like. He made his first car, an electric car, in 1894 by welding two bicycle frames together and filling the middle with batteries and such. Riker, as a make of electric cars, was quite successful in the late 19th and into the turn of the next one, making electric race cars, land speed record cars, and even commercial trucks. But Andrew wanted to get into internal combustion car design, and when his buddy JJ gave him an opportunity at Locomobile, he jumped on it. Sam Davis recognized the talent and offered him the position of Vice President of Engineering, which he accepted. Riker went to work designing Locomobile's first internal combustion car, and it was a beauty. Four-cylinder engine of 12 horsepower, 3-speed gearbox with chain drive to the rear wheels, strongly built. It was a well-designed car, and unlike many of its contemporaries, it also performed well. With Sam Davis running the company and Andrew Riker designing the cars, Locomobile ceased production of steam cars by 1904 and went headfirst into gas cars. And these were some serious automobiles. Now their motto was the best built car in America, and it was hard to argue the point. The Locomobiles of the first quarter of the 20th century were amongst the most prestigious cars available in the United States. Presidents, monarchs, movie stars, and industrial moguls all got in line to buy a Locomobile, not always knowing the craziness it took to bring that car into reality. Thanks for watching Vintage Car History, and we'll see you next week. Peace.